Hi, and welcome back to Beans and Bezels. This watch and this review might come off as slightly out of place since it isn't like anything else I've reviewed before. Gyre is a brand based out of the Netherlands and they were on Kickstarter in June 2020 to try and launch the Seacleaner project. Their goal was to create a watch out of recycled plastic, and the plastic would be collected as part of a larger ocean cleanup effort. Ghost nets, that's discarded fishing nets, are collected and sold to recycling facilities that turn it into plastic pellets, which eventually get made into these watch cases. These ghost nets are collected from the Indian Ocean Gyre, and an extra 5% of the profits were promised to be donated to the Ocean Cleanup Foundation. Additionally, the NATO strap is also made entirely of recycled plastic bottles. As a watch enthusiast, I like this idea and I respect this noble cause. Gyre are not the only players in this game with this idea, and Alpina recently released a similar watch, the Seastrong Gyre, last year for around $1,500. Smaller names in the watch industry like TRIWA and Tom Ford also have similar watches at $150 and $1,000 respectively. This is also the first Kickstarter watch project that I've ever backed. I usually don't do this because I'd rather not tie up my money for 6 to 8 months. But this is a cause I was happy to support, and given the $250 price of this watch, I was comfortable with forgetting about it for a little while. If you're not a watch person and you backed this project and received your watch, I'm sure you're thrilled with it. You got to support an interesting cause, you got a neat watch out of it as well. But since I'm a self-proclaimed watch critic that thrives on nitpicking at watches, I thought I'd take a closer look to see how good the watch actually is. So let's check it out. I measured the case to be 42mm in diameter, 50.5mm from lug to lug, if you can even call them that, and 11.25mm in height. The case is mostly made out of recycled plastic, but there are some steel elements like the bezel, the crown, and the caseback. The plastic has a matte finish and doesn't look like a cheap glossy plastic finish. The case design has a tonneau style silhouette with an interesting hooded lug design. The lug width is 20mm. You then have a slim 120 click unidirectional dive bezel made out of stainless steel. The bezel requires a little effort to grip, but has excellent action and no backplay. Given the plastic case, I was expecting a pretty shabby bezel system, but this bezel action can give most divers a run for their money. The bezel does not have any loomed elements and contain painted elements only. When I backed this project, it was supposed to have green painted minute ticks on the bezel and a green painted pip inside the triangular marker. But they seem to have changed their mind when this went into production, and I'm not particularly impressed by this design change. There's a 5mm steel crown at the 4 o'clock position that is recessed into the plastic case. The crown is signed with some green paint. I wish they had placed a larger order for the green paint and used it on the bezel too, like we were shown initially. But that's just me being salty. Flipping it over, you have a screw-round caseback with some details etched onto it, along with first edition, which is what I suppose all the Kickstarter backers will get. This watch is rated for up to 100 meters of water resistance. I'd hoped that this project would unlock the blue dial option when I backed it, but it didn't meet that funding goal. I was happy with the green dial until I found out that they were going ahead with the blue dial anyway, just after the Kickstarter campaign. That made me a little annoyed, but this wasn't a very serious watch purchase for me anyway, so I'll survive. And I can overlook these poorly handled decisions because of the bigger picture problem that drives this product. I was surprised to learn that I actually like this dial design. The first design element is the 4 primary hour indices and the text that reads recycled ocean plastic. That's just to make sure you haven't forgotten why you bought this watch. The 4 hour markers are filled with lume with the double painted index at the 12 o'clock position. You then have a painted inner track that uses small ticks for the minute markers and larger rectangular ticks for the other hour markers. The printing quality is okay. There is an angled date window at the 4 o'clock position that is cut into the dial. It has a white date wheel and black text. But the non-color match date wheel does not bother me as much as the ugly offset markers printed to the right of the date window. I can maybe come to terms with the idea that this is practical, but it does not do any favors to the design. You then have the brand's name and logo printed below the 12 o'clock index and the watch name and some details above the 6 o'clock index. I like the use of green on the logo and yellow for solar power. It definitely has a very casual watch vibe to it, so there's no harm in making it a bit colorful. The handset is pretty unique, and I can't say I'm sold on the design. The hour hand is short with a narrow black border and a large surface area for lume, but it is a ways off from being close to the hour markers. The minute hand is awkwardly large with a thicker white border and green lume to match the rest of the accents. I think the green lume is cool, but I would have preferred if the hand was a bit smaller. You then have a painted black seconds hand that extends all the way beyond the seconds track and has a green circular loomed element that is a nice touch. Below the dial are solar cells that power this watch, and in certain angles you can see them, which is pretty cool, and goes to show how thin the outer dial layer actually is. Overall, I don't think this is the greatest watch design, but it's not horrible either. The loom design on this watch is decent, but the indices are too weakly loomed to earn this watch any praises. It isn't very bright and fades quickly. The hands are pretty generously loomed, and the minute hand in particular ends up being the brightest element around. I think the most interesting aspect of the loom is the fact that the seconds hand has a small loomed element too. I don't think I've seen that on many quartz watches before. As I mentioned earlier, this watch uses a solar-powered quartz movement. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find out which movement was used specifically, and all that was mentioned was that it's a Japanese movement, so I suspect that this is either from Seiko or Citizen. I like that it's a solar-powered movement, and it is another commitment to the theme of this watch and its purpose. The 42mm diameter and 50.5mm lug-to-lug width, together with the lack of a conventional lug design and the NATO strap, make this watch appear pretty bulky on my 6 1/4 inch wrist. The height is reasonable at 11.25mm, and I don't have any complaints regarding the comfort. The plastic makes it pretty light, and the overall flat profile helps it stay balanced. The straps are pretty cool as they're made entirely from recycled plastic bottles, and unlike the metal loop pin shown on their website, the pin on this buckle appears to be made out of recycled plastic too. At the end of this, you might be asking yourself why I'd bother scrutinizing this watch so heavily when in fact it's less of a product and more of a means to support a project focused on environmental impact. And you're right, I've asked myself the same question a few times throughout the course of working on this review. But a watch is a watch, and Gyre's goal was to make a good watch without losing sight of sustainability and innovation, so it's only fair to hold them to their word. And all things considered, I think they did a pretty fine job. I don't regret spending a single penny on this, and while it may not be the best watch you can buy for $250, it looks unique, has a fun color scheme, and will be a testament to the fact that you can make interesting products out of all the junk we throw into the oceans each year. As a watch enthusiast, I felt obligated to check this out and support this project, and I think some of you might find this interesting as well. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to read my other reviews in the link below.